So like this is like almost an emergency podcast. It's trade deadline reaction. I hit up Sean yesterday, my guy from Philly, and I'm like, hey man, you want to talk trade deadline? When can you talk? And he's like, tomorrow. And then Josh just hits me. He goes, you need somebody to talk shit on the podcast? I'm like, yeah, come on. So I brought my two friends together. Sean, what's up, man?
How's it going, man? Long time
Man,
no speak.
I know, man. We communicate via Instagram every day, but it's good to see your face and hear your voice. What's
Yeah,
up,
last time I spoke to you, we got roasted by the Hawks in the playoffs. So, better spirits this time around.
Josh? Yes, sir. And the guy who got you roasted brings us here together. What's up, Josh? How we doing?
Doing well. It's funny that Sean mentions that. I feel like the last time I saw UAC, the Falcons were getting roasted at Mercedes-Benz by the Saints and Taysom Hill. You had very choice words to say about that, but we'll leave that there.
Yeah, you talk about money well spent. One home victory the entire season, and that was against the Lions. Tough to be a Falcons fan, but it's Big Baby and friends, and we're going to talk the NBA trade deadline. So let's talk about. No, actually, let's talk about. Wrong button. Let me get it together. Ben Simmons and James Harden are what leverage looks like. You cannot like the way Harden left left Brooklyn. You cannot like the way Harden left Houston. But guess what? When you're really good at what you do, you get to do things that people don't like. You can be upset that Ben Simmons laid an egg against the Hawks in the second round of the playoffs and then didn't go to the Olympics, then didn't play all season, was battling with his mental health, if that's what you want to believe. I don't know. But guess what? When you have leverage, you can get out of a situation. And, people outside of the NBA think it's crazy. Like, oh, that's why I don't like the NBA. See, the NFL, they would never let the players run the league. They will never let the inmates run the asylum, right? Shout out to Bob McNair. But the thing is, the NBA is a different league. And until the NBA adjusts to look like more like society, it's going to continue to be this way, and the ratings are going to continue to drop because people in America don't like to see the little man win. And it's okay, but in our capitalist society, we are firm believers in the institution. We like the institution. You go work hard for a company and you retire after 30 years with your pension and your watch. But God forbids the low man on the totem pole say, hey, I don't like this place. I'm leaving. So because of the way our society is built, the NBA goes counter to our society, but the NBA is just like Twitter. The people who are there and the people who consume it, they love it. They don't mind it at all. But the opinions that you hear on Twitter and the things that you see in the NBA, they don't appeal to the common person. They don't appeal to the casual fan. But the thing that we should all take away from this is don't doubt Daryl, because Daryl Mori knows what the hell he's doing. Sean, as the guy from Philly who had to watch this whole thing kind of play out, man, what are your thoughts on how Daryl Mori handled the situation?
I think it was beautiful, honestly. I mean, obviously, it's easy to say that in retrospect now that we got a former MVP and a 10-time All-Star. It didn't look good there for a little bit, but I mean, I think you're right on the side of like both sides had leverage. Like Ben was willing to light $19 million on fire, which gave him leverage. Like, listen, I'm going to sit out. That's my leverage. Like, I won't come to work. And Daryl had leverage by like, okay, you're not going anywhere until I get the deal I want. So I think they both had leverage, and Daryl also shout out to him for not being bullied by Clutch or Twitter or I don't know anyone on ESPN or any of that stuff. But I think at the end of the day, it worked out for both of them. Surprisingly, one of the few NBA trades you can say like, oh wow, that made both teams better. Oh, you're on mute. Still on mute.
I'm done muting my mic. I'm just gonna be quiet. Hey, Josh, as a guy who was just kind of an onlooker here, what were your thoughts on how Daryl Mori handled Ben Simmons?
I mean, I feel like overall for the situation, he couldn't have come out any better. To turn a guy that didn't want to play for you into a top 20 player who can put up 50 points or a triple-double, if not both on any given night, is amazing. I mean, I think that, like, sure, there's a mental health aspect to it that may or may not exist that people are, more sensitive to, but I think ultimately he didn't force him to play, didn't really drag him out in the media. He said he was willing to let it go as far as he could, which I think, can you not expect that from a guy that's running a franchise? Like, he was just being more transparent with the media than he probably had to be ultimately, I think, than most people are willing to be. I think there wasn't the PR spin that was there, but just really fun to see a guy turn a guy that can't shoot a ball into a guy that can shoot it from half court. And so, cheers to him. Like, his weekend is going to be pretty great, I'm sure. I hope he celebrates. That's a coup at that point. That's a coup.
The thing is, what I like about how Daryl handled it is it shows you that owners should really buy into their GMs, their presidents of basketball operations, and let their basketball people be basketball people. Because there are other GMs who just couldn't do it because the ownership would not let them just stall him, just like stall him out, man. And I think the NFL should take a look at this and say, hey, owners, let the people who you hire to run your operation. Because if he had pressure, y'all could have had Harrison Barnes and De'Aaron Fox. Or you could have got CJ McCollum. And not that CJ McCollum is a bad player, but he's not James Harden. James Harden reuniting with Daryl, I think, is also going to reinvigorate James Harden because people want to talk about, he whined his way out of Houston. Well, new ownership, new GM, and the franchise wasn't going in the direction that lined up with where his career was going. He gets to Brooklyn and KD's hurt. Then, Kyrie decides not to get vaccinated. That's his personal decision. I don't care that you don't get vaccinated until it's time to affect work. Like, you got a job to do. And in a team sport, hey, demand a trade to a team that doesn't have a vaccine requirement or get fucking vaccinated. And because Kyrie didn't do that, you're sitting there like, at James, you're like, dude, I'm trying to win a championship. You know what I'm saying? These New York strip clubs really ain't Houston. You know what I'm saying? Like, and now Kyrie's playing some games, but he's not playing other games. And to James's credit, he called Kyrie out in the media multiple times. It was subtle. There were subtle jabs, but at the same time, he let it be known. So I'm saying all that to say, good on Philly for allowing Daryl to do his job. But now, Sean, how do you think James Harden fits with Joel Embiid?
Well, just by simple math, just by the fact of that Ben Simmons wasn't playing, you basically upgraded Steph Curry into James Harden at shooting guard or point guard, wherever you want to put him. And Curry is an excellent role player, excellent 3-point shooter, but he's shorter. He's not very good on defense. He got cooked by Kevin Huerter in the playoffs last year, which basically lost Game 7 for us. He's an okay passer. Can't really get much separation with dribble moves. Not the greatest athlete. And he needs to set his feet to be able to shoot, which kind of eliminates shoot off the dribble for him. Harden isn't nearly the standstill shooter, but 36% from three career. He's an amazing scorer, amazing distributor. The one thing that I'm worried about a little bit is the Allen Iverson parallel here with his lifestyle. We've seen people before in Philly, favorite player ever, doesn't take care of himself, strip club all night. I will mention there were some funny tweets from strippers last night that said, I just gave James Harden a lap dance. He said he's going to Philly. Greatest way to probably find that out ever. I don't know if anyone actually found out that way, but that's hilarious. But Iverson went from a 32-year-old all-star to out of the league by 34 just because he didn't take care of himself. And that's, Harden's 32 at the moment. So you hope that these hamstring injuries are more him just maybe giving up on Brooklyn He's also, say what you will about the situations that he left, but he did quit on 2 teams in a row within a year and a half, maybe a year. You can say what you want about the circumstances, but it is what it is at that point. His track record in the playoffs isn't great, which Embiid's isn't either. So it's kind of redemption time for both of those guys. And we all know how he likes to dominate the ball, and so does Embiid. So it'll be interesting to see if this is a your turn, my turn offense, like the CP3 Harden offense was. It wasn't really they were working together. It was just, okay, you get a shot. All right, I'll get a shot. And it worked because they're both amazing. Embiid could win the MVP this year. But it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting what he does off the ball. It'll be interesting his motivation, because I fully expect him to come in and just look completely different. He kind of seems like the kind of player that can turn the switch off and turn the switch back on. We joke about the fat suit last year. He could come in and look skinny all of a sudden. You never know with Harden. Um, it's the best player Embiid's played with on offense since Jimmy Butler, maybe. I mean, obviously he's definitely the best player he's played with, but it also fills Philly's biggest weakness, which was the backup point guard. Doc Rivers loves these all bench lineups, which have just like we'll be up by 13, he'll put the bench in, and then they'll just lose the entire lead immediately. So if you stagger the minutes, hopefully, you got to cross your fingers with Doc sometimes, but that means no more point Korkmaz, which is better for Philly fans everywhere. He can be a backup point guard, kind of run the second team, stagger the minutes. You always have an all-star MVP on the floor. And then we'll just see who does what end of games. But I think ultimately, as long as you pick up a backup big on the buyout market, because Drummond was okay. He was probably the best backup we've had for Embiid. But that's not the biggest worry at this point. I think they'll work out. It'll just be whether they work together, because Embiid isn't the greatest pick and roll big. He doesn't really work well in the pick and roll. He's not really a lob threat, which Harden likes. But I think it'll be more of a your turn, my turn deal. I'm excited, but cautiously optimistic, I'll say.
Okay, Josh, how do you see Embiid and Harden fitting together?
I feel like really the tough thing for me, if I'm James Harden, either way, you're going to be a 1-2 punch. I think I take my chances with arguably one of the best players in the game, if not the best player, and stick it out with KD in the playoffs, the guy that's like been proven and has done some things. You know, no disrespect to Embiid, rather than like take my chances elsewhere, because you still have the possibility of adding Kyrie to your team if if the Nets decide that they're just going to pay the fine, or playoff time, Kyrie decides to get his life together and just do what he needs to do ultimately. But, I think that what you do have in Philly is a 1-2 punch that is pretty rare. I can't remember the last time that we've seen two players with this much talent offensively. Defensively is pretty one-sided towards Embiid. But I think that just the different abilities, either of them being able to put up 50 points on any night, they can play off of each other in a way that probably gives him more space than he had playing along Kyrie or KD, because of where he lines up and likes to post up and do some of those things. And so I'm excited to see what it's going to look like, but it still feels like it's set up for the Sixers and the Nets to meet up in the playoffs, and for us to really see who wins. Like, it's going to be kind of like a referendum on who won, and we'll see come playoff time ultimately, I think.
Hey, and last thing, Sean, last year y'all could have made this trade and you would have lost Maxey and Tybalt. How does it feel only losing Seth Curry? Like, I mean, you can say that you lost Andre Drummond, but sure.
Yeah, I mean, it feels great. First off, because Curry's been hurt and not playing well, so it makes it easier to swallow that pill when he hasn't looked great recently. Now, I know that it's a game of runs, it's ebbs and flows, and he could heat up immediately like he did last year's playoffs. But Maxey has been amazing this year. I mean, the kid's 20 years old. He averages like 18 points. He's shooting 40% from three. Drives to the basket. Great. It's amazing. It kind of, you keep obviously you opened a 2-year window when Harden signed the one player option. So you have 2 years with Harden, and then you still have your long-term future with Maxey. I loved it. I thought it was amazing, honestly.
All right, man. So let's transition to the other player in this trade. We got Ben Simmons. And I'll tell you what, I watched Ben Simmons in the playoff games against the Hawks. In person, he was dejected. You could tell he wanted no parts of what was going on out there. Every time he touched the ball, he's getting booed. He's coming to the sideline with his head down, sitting at the end of the bench, and you're like, he's done. He's done. And he's by far one of the most physically impressive specimens I've ever seen in my life. Joel Embiid is easily the biggest human I've ever seen in my life, but Ben Simmons and Dwight Howard are damn near the same size to include their girth. Pause. But we got Ben in Brooklyn, and I keep going to Sean first because you just got the Philly stuff, man. Y'all just ran Ben out of town. I mean, Doc shitted on him, and B shitted on him. You fans are some of the best and worst fans in sports. I know people like to call y'all some of the most passionate fans, and I'm just like, it's kind of like New York Knicks fans to a certain degree, that you become so hard on your team that you kill the players, man. And now we got Ben Simmons going to a team that has no fans. How do you think Ben's going to fare in Brooklyn?
It's perfect. There's no one to criticize him. I think, for one, and we don't have to get into the whole Philly fan thing because we could be on here for hours, but I think one of the reasons we are so passionate is because I feel like we're also a very knowledgeable fan base. Like, we know what we're looking at for the most part. So it's kind of like, it's so frustrating because we know what we're looking at for the most part, basketball wise. And I understand that it can be rough, especially when your head coach and your best player seemingly calls you out. But it's one of those things where if you're a professional athlete, you should have some type of mental fortitude to be able to use that as fuel to the fire. And that's not what was done, obviously. In terms of Ben Simmons fitting with Brooklyn, it's perfect. There's less media attention than there is on the Knicks. You have KD and Kyrie, who all they do is get buckets, and Ben Simmons loves to pass and play defense. He'll have to be used more as a screener and a screen and roll. He'll make the pass on the short roll now, the highest screener roll at the 3-point line. But he loves that. He can play point guard when Kyrie's not on the floor. He moves the ball. It's honestly it's perfect for him. He can be out of the limelight. What is he, the third, fourth option on that team offensively? It's like, it's a dream for him, honestly. I feel good for him as a basketball player, even though he's soft as tissue paper and is despised by the town I live in. But like, basketball wise, it's a match made in heaven, and I'm happy for him as a basketball player, not as a human being, though.
Hey Josh, you have a hard-nosed guy on your team, Jimmy Butler. A guy that Ben Simmons ran out of Philly. Because I think Philly wins the championship if Ben Simmons, is okay with Jimmy being there. Let's just compare and contrast Ben to Jimmy. And how would you feel having Ben Simmons on your team?
I think that Jimmy is an enigma. You love him or you hate him. And I think that with Ben Simmons, he hasn't given folks much to love at lots of points. Going back to LSU, his disposition, his academics, or lack thereof, if we can even call it that, it feels like there's a bunch of spaces where Ben Simmons just hasn't shown any integrity or backbone, or for whatever reason. And he was a young guy; it's hard to hold it against him, but you hope that he grows into something different. And I don't know at what point he's shown leadership. And I think that a lot of guys, that's what they're looking for in the locker room. They're looking, especially if you're going to be that big and you're going to be a guy that's commanding that much of a salary cap. Ultimately, I think that guys want to look to you for leadership. They want to look to you for good energy. They want to look to you for, having tough conversations, for holding folks accountable. And I don't know if we've ever seen that from Ben Simmons. Ultimately, he doesn't seem to hold himself or anybody else accountable. He's just there to either get paid or, whatever it is. And so I think, Sean, that we've been on the same page about a lot of things. For Ben Simmons and him in that Brooklyn offense, I can't see it working. They really effectively traded a guy that could shoot really well and do a bunch of things, and pass it. As multifaceted as they get, averaging nearly a triple double for a guy that is afraid to occasionally take jump shots. And I think that I've definitely seen the Ben Simmons workouts right before the season, and I was like, oh man, I'm ready to see him. And then he decides actually, I don't want to play at all. It won't be happening. And so maybe if he's, gym session, Ben Simmons, sure, then I'll believe it. But I think ultimately They just got a guy that can't shoot. I'm surprised they didn't flip him. I was really waiting for a 3-team trade there, with maybe him getting swapped out with Westbrook. I think that I'd rather have Westbrook than Ben Simmons on my team right now.
Wow. So that kind of would have been a great transition to go into LA, but I don't want to go to LA yet. But I got to give you credit for really teeing up a great transition, Josh.
Anytime.
But you look at Ben Simmons, man, and I'm cautious about even having an opinion on the fit, because if you have Kyrie on the floor, I think I like it. If you have a healthy KD, I think I like it, because you put KD and Ben Simmons in a pick and roll. Like, how do you guard that, right? It's Ben as your role guy. Even if you got even if you got Ben as the ball handler, KD setting the pick, and it's not going to be a traditional pick and roll. No, but like, what does that look like? How do you cover that? You know what I mean? It's scary. And do they do that? Who knows? But with Ben already being an odd personality, I feel like KD's not your typical leader, and not in a bad way. I think KD sets a great example of how to be a professional athlete, take care of your business on and off the court, work hard, play hard, all of that stuff. I think he has great balance. I would love to play with Kevin Durant. Some don't like his use of burners, and I say, look, man, it's not that he's afraid to talk back as Kevin Durant. He's protecting his other business interests, and he's like, y'all just ain't gonna be keep talking to me crazy as if I'm not a grown man. So I don't knock him for that. But then you have Kyrie, who's mercurial, to say the least. And then you throw in Ben, and like, you just have an odd big three. And now you're going to have Patty Mills, who's likely going to be coming off the bench, as your leader of your team. And I don't, Kyrie said it best when he said, yeah, we don't have no coach, because, I mean, if you look at what Steve Nash does on the bench, I heard on a podcast this week, he's the new clapper. He's taking over for Jason Garrett as the clapper. So I don't know what to think about this team, but the one thing I do want to say is ESPN, and golly, here I go calling that ESPN, putting a trade grade on it before anybody touches the court is absolutely insane to me. I think it's worse than draft grades, because I think those are pretty dumb too, but I know we have to do it to create content and get people talking. But it's like, it's a B for I think Brooklyn, a C- for Philly. And you got Stephen A. Smith coming out and saying that that the Philly 76ers got fleeced. Fleeced by who? How? You took a player who wasn't playing and you flipped him for a guy who was number 3 in MVP votes last year. Like, what the fuck are we talking about? There's no fleecing. I think both teams got what they needed, because Harden was going to walk out of the door for nothing, or he was going to walk out the door for pennies on the dollar in a signing trade. And Ben Simmons is now, he's getting paid to play. Because I'm not going to keep paying you and just having you sit out, taking up roster spot and salary cap all this time. So, and Josh, let's get back to you talking about you'd rather have Russell Westbrook than Ben Simmons, okay? And LA obviously would rather have Russell Westbrook than Ben Simmons or whoever the hell else they would want to have, because they stayed the same, man. What do you think LA goes from here? They want to go to the buyout market, and from the beginning of the season or from the off season when they made the Russell Westbrook move to now, how do you feel about
it? I was surprised that they didn't move anybody. It felt like they needed a change. Honestly, I would have sold pretty much anything to see Dame and LeBron get together. I think that, I'm surprised that didn't happen, or they didn't just try to make a change just for the sake of it. I think the team, as it's presently constructed, is going to need to figure out some new lineups, but I don't know if there is one. LeBron and AD play together, and they still, are losing to teams that you wouldn't expect, even when favored. And I think that it's been weird to watch that dynamic. But I just think that Westbrook brings some explosiveness. Maybe he doesn't come in for the same role, but I'd rather have a guy that's not afraid to shoot and maybe keeps teams honest, as opposed to just hoping the pick and roll works perpetually. And I think that that's like maybe the difference that I have there. You know, like Westbrook's shot isn't great, but he's, you know, like hitting something eventually. But a guy that won't shoot the three can't keep a defense honest ultimately. And so I think that like that's my concern. You know, maybe again, who knows what his development's been like. We haven't seen him play in a long time. And so we can only, you know, like recent memories shows us the worst moment of his career to this point. And so like it's easy to harp on that, but hopeful that he can just like somehow slide in there and make it work. But you know, I think my concern is, does he have the yips ultimately? You know, like how much of this is the yips? And we're seeing that same situation that played out in Philly before, you know, with a guard that's now in Orlando or wherever he's ended up. And, you know, I think that dynamic is just weird to watch play out again. So
almost forgot about him for a second. That's the first time I've thought about Markelle Fultz in some time.
Dang, that could have been Jason Tatum, huh? Or Lonzo Ball.
Even De'Aaron Fox would have been nice.
right?
Sean, man, so I don't remember what your original take was on the Lakers when they made the Westbrook move. I don't know if you thought they should have, you know, went and just got Buddy Hield and, you know, added the shooter that helps the team out down the stretch, or get Russell Westbrook, who we thought would cover up for street clothes, because we know street clothes is gonna be in street clothes.
Well, it's also one of those things where like AD, since coming back, has been amazing, but this year on 3-point attempts he's been really bad. So their spacing, even with just LeBron and AD, has been worse than normal. I didn't think it was going to work purely because the NBA is all about space at this point. Like, you need to create space for your two superstars. I don't care how good LeBron's and AD's pick and roll is if Westbrook is the one in the corner, because they're going to give him all the room in the world. I understand that like maybe being able to shoot and being a threat is better than not being a threat, but I've seen plenty of plays where Westbrook, they just leave him there. Like, they take a couple seconds to go follow out on him. And I think one of the things that I think is, yeah, his offense, he's been Westbrook this season. I understand that, but his lackadaisical, almost aloof presence on defense might be worse. I saw I believe it was against the Nets, where he left Patty Mills, who I think had hit like 6 threes at that point, wide open for the game-winning three. And it's just, he's been that way his entire career. And you can say all this stuff about, I've heard a bunch of stuff on all the talk shows about he needs to accept a different role, he needs to change, he needs to do more of the dirty work. It's not going to happen, because it would have happened by now. The weirdest thing to me is how, well, not weird, it's kind of hilarious as someone who's not a fan of the Lakers, but just how meddling their ownership is with their GM and the process of, you know, rotations and who gets to see playing time. I mean, if Frank Vogel had his way, you can't tell me that Russell Westbrook wouldn't be coming off the bench at this point. They kind of done it almost without doing it so far. Like, they'll start him and then they'll take him off the floor after the first 4 minutes just to kind of have him run with the second team, which is probably the smartest way to not kill his ego, but kind of move him around in the rotation, which is a smart idea. But he just, it's one of those guys where he's got to accept the dirty work. He's got to lock in on D, or he's got to play less. Because I mean, they have some of the shooters between Austin Reeves and even Malik Monk has looked good when he's played with LeBron and those guys. You have some of the shooters. Laker. What's up?
Malik Monk is the third best Laker.
I think he might be, next to Pistons legend Stanley Johnson. Like, there's players on that team, and like, you can't tell me that LeBron hasn't taken a worse team to the finals, because I've seen him do it at least twice. It's just, I think it's Westbrook's ego at this point. He's got to accept that for them to win, he either needs to be a sixth man or act as a big man. He's got to set picks, he's got to go for rebounds, and he's got to play big. He can do it. It's just, I don't think he's wired that way at this point.
I think that this thing just keeps seeming to happen to LeBron, and maybe I'm just a jaded lover from what happened in Miami, but it feels like at a certain point, about 3 years into LeBron's tenure anywhere, people just start watching him, and they don't play well, they don't do anything, they forget, they can't get their game off. Maybe LeBron has taken all of their talents away or something, but it just seems like at every point in his career, it's about 3 years in that people just like on his teams are no longer able to enhance what he does so amazingly. And, which is like the whole game of basketball. And it feels like the same thing is happening to LA that happened in Miami, where it's like, it's flaming out. the experiment isn't working, regardless of whatever, what pieces they put around him. I don't know. I think that Westbrook is what he is, but they need to figure out a lineup with paper thin AD that is going to use him best. If he can still put up 50 and he can potentially be New Orleans, LeBron's got to take a step back if he wants to go anywhere. I think that's the only they go as far as AD takes them, and he's got to let him do that until he either breaks down or gives up. I think that's really where they're at, where they got to try something different and not put it in LeBron's hands all the time.
It's wild. It's like one of the first players I've seen win. I just didn't think it was going to happen where AD would win a championship and then go immediately on autopilot mode. He was, in my opinion, he was the Finals MVP. He was amazing, defensively, offensively, and then whether it's, he always gets dinged up a little bit, but he comes to play he's been playing better since he came back, but this season he seems checked out a little bit.
Let me shoot AB a little bit of bail. AD a little bit of bail, okay? I'm not shooting AB any bail at all, that fucking jackass. But AD last season, he came back out of shape, like most of the league did, because the league pushed up the start date. And players had already had off-season routine set up to, okay, I'm chilling, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and I'm going to start ramping up here. And in the middle of that, the league says, oh, no, we're starting now. And everyone's not LeBron.
Especially after you played in the finals,
right.
A month and a half.
Exactly. And guess what? If I win a championship, I'm celebrating. I've been locked in the bubble. We're having all these private parties that nobody knows about. I'm enjoying my championship stuff. Now, I don't understand why Luka came back fat now to shape, because he got put out in the first round, which is where, that's kind of his MO. But I'm going to leave Luka alone, because the Luka hive on YouTube is absolutely crazy. But with Westbrook, we talk about Westbrook needing to take on a new role, but the problem is that he hasn't been humbled. He has not been truly humbled. What he said the other day, I'm still going to make 90 million, okay? It's hard to humble somebody who makes 90 million. What humbled Melo? He got traded, bought out, and then, left for the Wolves. Nobody picked him up. He finally gets picked up by the Blazers, and he's coming off the bench. So Melo gets humbled by that, and if you listen to him in any media he's done, he talked about where he just took a break from basketball. Because he's like, I've been the best player on my team my entire life, and now you want me to come off the bench? And even though Paul George and Russell Westbrook were more productive NBA players at that time, at no point in their careers were they ever more talented basketball players than Carmelo Anthony. So it's in Melo's head, he's like, I'm better than them, even though he wasn't at that point in his career, and then he goes down to the Suns, and Daryl does what the Rockets. Daryl does what Daryl does. He's going to make the best team decision. And Westbrook needs to get humbled. And they talk about protecting Westbrook's ego. Look here, we're paying you $45 million a year. You can tuck your ego up your ass, bro. The ego's in the paycheck. And if it's really about winning, and if it's not about winning, let's get you the hell up out of here. Because GM LeBron started doing what GM LeBron does. He's all about the experiment. But when it comes trade deadline time, if LeBron don't like the team like that, they lost that Blazers game because LeBron was trying to make a statement. He does it every single year. He's not confident in his team. Around the trade deadline, he gets to talking real funny, acting weird, dropping games he's not supposed to drop. And I think that's what happened. And Josh, you talked about wanting to see Dame Lillard down in LA. And the Blazers have made some decisions to blow up the team. So I don't know why they just didn't do a 1-for-1 Dame for Russell Westbrook swap, because Dame's going to eventually ask out. The Blazers aren't going to win shit because they're the Blazers. And at least Russell Westbrook puts people in the stands, and you can let him run around, give you 28, 12, and 10 because there's nobody there to support him. And who gives a damn about the development of Anthony Simons? So
I think by that logic, though, that John Wall trade would have made a lot of sense because he's been humbled. This whole process has damn sure humbled him, right? So I feel like that would have been all the more reason to make that trade. I know that there was one floated out there where I guess they would have had to give up their last first-round pick for the next 6 years or something. But I mean, if you want a chip, it was worth a shot. Just because he would have done. John Wall would have come into the Lakers, I guarantee it, and done anything it took to win at this point. Just to play basketball, I feel like that's all it would have taken for him. If he would have lasted without getting injured, I don't know. But, he would have accepted any role, is my point.
John Wall's hoop tape looked serious. If you haven't been on his Instagram, check it out. I really like the hype that he tried to put around his trade deadline season that didn't happen. And so he's stuck. I don't know what's going to happen with his career, but he's got to. It would have been fun, and he would have been better than Westbrook. And I don't understand what message they're trying to send. And yeah, the buyout market is cool, but the only buyout anybody wanted to hear was Westbrook potentially. Who are they going to pick up? That's going to get bought out that'll even change that team ultimately. So
nobody. And I wish they would have made the John Wall deal because John Wall is a little bit younger. Yeah, he's more hurt, similar type player, but John Wall has shown that he can and will play off the ball. He's a better defender than Russell Westbrook, and he's a slightly better shooter, not much better.
He's better off the catch. His off the catch numbers are actually not bad. Believe it or not.
He's a goon though.
Huh?
He's a goon though. Him and Brandon Ingram are two of the most gooned out dudes in the league right now. Talk about straight up dudes that are in the streets. I don't care what anybody says. And John Wall, the man is yadded up and he's blooded out. We're going to call it what it is,
I think that may have been a concern to have John Wall in LA with Bloods and Crips. And then also he's a clutch guy. And I mean, clutch, it already runs a good portion of the league. I think that Rich Paul is conscious of those optics and he doesn't want to scare off potential players from coming to the Lakers in this offseason because of Clutch is really running the Lakers. And, CAA, they already got beef with Rich for how he did them, try to poach all the talent and go hold on, Rich. Nah, we're not sending any of our clients to the Lakers. So I ultimately think that's what happened. It's not going to get reported, but, we're all savvy enough sports fans to understand some of the politics that goes into trading and free agents and the agent games. But let's get back to blowing up the Blazers. The Blazers have waved the white flag to say no mas, no mas. They got rid of, all NBA defender from Tennessee State, Rob Covington. They got rid of they got rid of somebody else who's not good.
Norm Powell, excuse me, he is actually decent. Norm Powell sent him down to the Clippers for Eric Bledsoe and shit. Did they waive Bledsoe after that?
I haven't seen it, but I hope I don't get a push notification telling me that they waived Bledsoe. Because, I mean, it baffles me that Eric Bledsoe gets to play NBA games and John Wall doesn't. I get their salaries are totally different, but come on, man. Come on. Eric Bledsoe was never a winning basketball player, let's be honest. And then they trade CJ McCollum to the Pelicans. And they get who do they get in return? They get my guy from Villanova. Come on, Sean, your guy, Josh Hart.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, they get Josh Hart and some other scraps. Pretty much what the Blazers are saying is we're blowing it up. And what they've said out their mouth is that they're going to retool the team around Damian Lillard. But Damian Lillard is at an age where I don't think he sees enough tools in the shed to want to be here. And I think he's going to be asking out at the end of the season, waiting for Chris Haynes to report it.
With what assets are they going to get anybody? Who are they going to trade? CJ McCollum was the biggest chip that they had on the team, and they traded him for a plate of red beans. And I'm like, I don't get what else is there? Portland isn't an attractive city for NBA, free agents. Maybe you get somebody on the buyout market, but you're competing with the Lakers and playing with LeBron. Dame might is reevaluated or in the next week or two with his 6-week timeline that he put on that surgery he had. And so I just don't really see what Portland was doing by trading CJ for nothing. I mean, Josh Hart, cool, but that's not CJ had more trade value than anybody else. And so I don't see who they're going to get that's going to really make a 1-2 punch in Portland that's going to be better than CJ and give them a better team, unless Dame just wanted more space.
It's also weird because what they traded for Covington versus what they traded Covington for was like a complete downgrade. I think they traded 2 first-round picks for him, and what they get back? Keon Johnson and a second rounder. I think that's his name. It just when you look at it that way, they just gave up 2 first-round picks for a Covington rental, and it didn't obviously work out, even though he's a Sixers legend. I'll give him props for that. And then they gave up Norm Powell, who I thought was pretty good. He's a good off-ball shooter. He's a tough defender. Like he's basically what you wanted Eric Gordon for if you were trying to get Eric Gordon during the trade deadline. So I think that was if you want to talk about who got fleeced, I think the Clippers fleeced them, obviously. But it's weird because it's one of those destinations, Portland, where like that's the only way CJ was going to the Pelicans is because they traded for him. Like that was why they had to do that. You either get people high in the draft or you get them via trades or salary jumps. So I feel like, do they still have their first round pick this year, the Blazers?
Keep talking and I'll look it up.
Okay, because that's the like small markets are put in such a spot in the NBA, and I mean, I guess in any sports league, but especially in the NBA, where like you can only get big stars a couple ways if you're a team like Portland, especially as Dame gets older and less durable. Unfortunately, I mean, other than Dame, what do you have? Nurkic? Is that who's left at this point? I guess Simons, but like that's your one young player, so it's unfortunate.
Yeah, that does not make a team. You know, I can't really understand what the game plan is, and you almost think that like, could they not have swapped like Westbrook for McCollum, and that would have been better for both teams ultimately. And CJ can run the one and prefers to, honestly, and it's been forced to with Dame out, and so you know like why not swap the guys? Like CJ's getting well paid. Maybe the money's not perfect, but you give him a chance at least, and you know it's probably not a perfect combination for Dame, but Dame might not play again this year if he doesn't want to. And I think that you give yourself a chance with a guy that like maybe you bring some folks over. So
they did pick up a first rounder from New Orleans. They owe their first rounder to the Chicago Bulls. So I guess that helps out. But you know, CJ McCollum has a new home in New Orleans. Let's hope he does not consume too many beignets like his teammate. And you know, I'm so
they're good. They're good. What can you do? They're really good.
Yeah, let me tell you, I am so torn on the New Orleans situation. I thought last year they should have been so much better than they were. All the Zion. I'm putting him in the Luka category of really good basketball player, really good counting stats. I'm just not convinced that they play winning basketball, especially in the playoffs, which Zion hasn't seen, neither has he seen the play-in either. Like, come on, man. We can't, you know, really just give Zion all this credit. And he hasn't won shit. And if you want to tell me that last year New Orleans had a worse roster than Memphis, you're crazy. Shout out to Ja for finally getting his credit for being who he's been since he came into the league. I'm so happy for him. But now we got Brandon Ingram, an all-star. We have CJ McCollum, who is that notch below all-star. You know, last year probably would have been an all-star if he didn't get hurt with the way he was playing. And Zion, if he ever comes back, you know, Fat Greg Oden, maybe. Josh, where do you see New Orleans going in the future?
So I'm absolutely with you. I think that this team should be a lot better than it is. They have cost me a lot of money on some parlays that I, YOLO'd, and I think that it just doesn't really make any sense. Brandon Ingram has all the talent in the world. Zion has all of the ability in the world, but he's got the same type of physical condition that Oprah has, like causing fluctuations in his weight, and so it's just I want so much more for the Pelicans, but I think that they got to figure something out. They need to blow something up, and they let Lonzo go, and he's been better in Chicago ultimately. I think that I've liked him there, and so. What is the problem? What is the piece that they're missing? They've had every different iteration of point guard. They keep choosing the same type. New Orleans has got to figure out how to take care of talent. I'm still reminded of the Boogie situation and how that played out and how his career has just been in a downward spiral. And You know, I think that something's got to give there, and I don't know exactly what it is. And maybe you wait for Brandon Ingram's trade value to be as high as it can be, and you get him out of there for the best pieces that you can, and you rebuild. But Zion's got to be a leader and step up for this team. You know, like they essentially have been tanking to get as close to anything as they could to you, and now you're hardly available. And like when you play, you're really efficient, and you're like LeBron and Tim Duncan blended together. But like if you're not on the court, availability, it needs to be your best ability at this point, and I think he's not doing that. So
it's weird because like he was awesome. Like he was really freaking awesome. Like I mean, what is he? 20 years old and he scored 27 points a game at like 60% from the field. Like that's more than young Barkley. That's like young Barkley with like jetpack on him. But like it's one of those things where like if he was healthy, I'd have all these like trade ideas for you. Be like, oh, move him for Valanciunas for Miles Turner because then he can space the floor and protect the rim and all these things. But he's not. Is he even with the team? He hasn't been to the facility. Like this would just be a lot more fun if he was playing because CJ Ingram, who's been playing really well since they started out, I think like 1-12. I think they've been a 500 team, so they've been pretty good. And he's been pretty good. But like and those three together, that's a fun team. That's at least an 8 seed. Like that's a team that you don't just trample every night. But you haven't even heard any news on him for a while. It was he came back, he was overweight. Obviously all those pictures of him in the sweatsuit came out and it didn't look great. And then he leaves and you haven't heard anything about him since. And like from someone in Philly, like it rarely works out. Like Embiid took 2 years off with a foot and a knee and a back injury, and by the grace of God or whoever you believe in, he came back. But like that never happens. Like big guys who are overweight, if Zion is even under 300 pounds at this point, that's a miracle. Foot and lower body injuries, like that's bad. That's really bad, and it's disappointing too, just because he gets paid a lot of money just to be in shape, and like you just want the best for that kid. Like he's so amazing that you just want him on the court. But I mean, I haven't heard anything about him. I haven't heard anything.
Who would have thought that he would have been like Greg Oden 2.0? You know, like I didn't anticipate that. I mean, just the physicality that he played with. It was, I mean, watching Zion in college felt like Bo Jackson, you know, and like when he steps out of the shoe or like splits his shoe in half when he's when Obama's at the game on that huge late night game, and that was one of those moments that you always remember. And I think that it's weird to watch his career not become what we thought it could be or should be to this point, especially playing with the efficiency that he's had. I feel like he needs to figure out who like Zebo, Zach Randolph's personal trainer was, and just like get that guy, because Zebo figured it out towards the latter end of his career and was healthy for about 6 seasons straight. And so I feel like that's who he needs to bring in, like somebody that knows how to work with that type of body type and just get him right.
It's weird too because he played 61 out of 72 games last year. He was relatively healthy, so it's just the offseason thing out of nowhere because he played last year. He was available.
Yeah, I'm just overall concerned about his health. I've gone back and forth with some people, and like, hey, big guys who explode too much, the impact wears on you. At some point, besides Zebo's personal trainer, he needs to get with Zebo's skill trainer to learn that below the rim, big body game that Zebo had, to where it was hard to guard Zebo, but Zebo didn't dunk, but we'll see. Some of us are optimistic about Zion. I'm less, but thoughts and prayers, and maybe he'll finally be that big fish that the Knicks land. Real quick, you guys got any thoughts on All-Star? Sorry, I didn't prep you for All-Star. It kind of just popped into my head, and I'm like, yeah, we got a few more minutes of Sean, so let's see if we can hit All-Star real quick.
I mean, I'm glad that there was a bunch of first-timers this year. That was cool. It shows that there's new talented guys in the league that are getting some shine. I'm glad that Garland got in. I'm glad that Lonzo Ball got, or LaMelo Ball got in. Am I missing anybody? The kid from the Spurs, Mori. I'm glad that there's like new talented young all-stars. There's a lot of like young dudes in this game. And also
starters.
What's up?
It's one of the starters who's the first-timer.
Oh, Wiggins. I mean, go for him. Go for him, man. After playing Minnesota. I'm
doesn't
not
make
saying that he
any
deserved
sense.
it.
It does not make any sense at all why Wiggins is on that starting team. And I feel like the best part that I've seen was the dynamic between LeBron and KD last night during the selection, with Harden coming up last. I think that it's that was funny to watch. I think LeBron not being able to contain himself was funny.
Brian Petty.
The clipboard thing. I mean, it was perfect.
He was keying behind that thing like it was a lifesaver.
If anyone didn't watch that, it's worth just going on YouTube and watching the entire show again. Chuck asked KD if the Nets have a team shrink, like it's gold.
I like this pre-retirement Chuck because he's really just starting to let stuff rip that he would only let rip on a podcast. He's just like, he caught Kyrie half man. I forgot what he said.
Half available or something.
Something like that. Ernie's asking Katie when he's gonna come back. I mean, they're just really letting it loose, man. But I really liked it. I like the fact that they get to draft the players because it shows you how the great players think of other great players. Like, Joker amongst the starters, he kind of, he didn't go as high on the list as some of you media types would have expected because, I think the media loves the Joker, but I don't think a lot of great players who don't play with him, which he doesn't play with any great players, respect exactly who he is and what he does. Well, you know what? I don't say that. I think they respect him, but they don't see him as a peer.
I think he's also not an all-star game type player. I feel like that also doesn't help.
Oh man, he's a great passer though. He's like great setup man for the oops and stuff like that. Yeah. And like full court passes. I think his passing ability makes him great for the all-star game. It's just nothing else.
Joe, he shouldn't be playing, honestly, and I'm biased as a Heat fan, but I think as long as my boy is out, he should have had to sit. He intentionally caused an injury to a dude that still hasn't played since, and I want that to be acknowledged. Like 40 games into this guy being injured, like a spinal injury. I think it's wild, and hopefully maybe that might have had something to do with it. I feel like there's some street politics, or hood politics going on in the league, and so I'm fine with that. Jokic is an electrifying player. I mean, arguably the best passing big we've ever seen, but like that situation is nasty.
Because the Morris brothers haven't ever cheap shot at anyone.
Have they put anybody out for 40 games? I don't
know. I don't think so. Those guys are always doing some questionable stuff. Not that anyone deserves to be injured. But.
Sure, you got chippy.
I feel like the result matters, right? Because we look at the Grayson Allen play. I don't think he deserved to get suspended for that play. I think he made a legitimate play on the ball, but because Caruso, the second best AC, broke his wrist, and Grayson Allen's personality and his reputation, that matters. And because Jokic doesn't have a bad reputation and the Morris brothers do, it's kind of like we're going to give Jokic the benefit of the doubt, and we're not going to give was it Marcus Morris y'all got down there in Miami? No, y'all got Keith. Yeah, not the one who was on the Lakers. Keith, yeah, because we used to call him Chief Queef, because he was awful in the bubble.
Not to mention everyone loves Caruso, which doesn't help.
It doesn't. Shit, Shaw, is there anything else NBA you want to hit before we get out of here?
No, I'm excited. I'm scared. There's a lot of emotions running through my body right now. And we've been playing well as a team this year without Ben Simmons or anyone for that spot. So I just, I'll be entertained. I'll be incredibly biased, but I hope everyone else enjoys watching whatever we're about to see in Philadelphia for the next foreseeable future, I guess.
All right, man. Thanks so much. I'll hit you when we get done. We're about to talk a little bit of Miami Dolphins before we close this thing out.
All right, y'all. It was good to talk to y'all.
All right, man. Take care, man. Pleasure meeting you.
Isn't it nice to have your friends meet your other friends
and hit it off? We did okay. The chemistry was solid.
I mean, yeah, y'all did better than me. I've been stuttering my ass off today.
It'd be like that. It's Friday, man. It's been a long week.
I'm telling you, I was in between taking a nap at 2:45, and I'm like, I'm gonna be groggy. Nah, let me just take a shower. I actually blew out my hair just to see how long it is.
How long do you got pull? You down?
I mean, with the hat on,
Yeah, a little fro. Okay.
Yeah, we got a little something up there. I could get the young boy braids if I wanted to. I'm 30.
You're gonna be wearing makeup next.
Fuck out of here. I draw a lot of tight pants.
Hey, and even those ain't popping no more, man. Everybody out here is dressing like somebody's grandpa.
Look, bro, I'm sorry, and I may be, probably like I was with the baggy pants. I carried them longer than I should have. We did show up to college with some big jorts. I'm gonna stay tight for a while. I'm not gonna look homeless like Kanye.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's hard. Even like my cargo pants, I prefer fitted, and to each their own.
How do you feel about that Kanye verse he shot at Pete?
Oh, which one? Didn't he have another one the other day?
Yeah, it's something about the 100 goons showing up at SNL.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like he's the type that would. I think there's going to be increased security at SNL moving forward. I think that he's going to spin it. Pete is going to spin it into something that it's not ultimately. But I mean, if that's my wife and we're not fully divorced and the papers aren't signed, I'm allowed to go hard for my wife. I'm married. Sure, Kanye's crazy and there's a level of whatever it is, but no, I'm not going to let you just hang out and kick it with my wife and think that everything's sweet while we're still on paper, especially if I want to be together with someone,
especially if I'm not getting invited to birthday parties.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty ugly how this whole thing is playing out. I'd hope that if any of my friends or I go through a divorce, we don't want to, we don't want that to happen, obviously. I'd hope to God it just would not play out like that, because for one, none of us are public figures. I hope to be one day. But when you see how both of them are playing these media games, these publicist games, and they're not talking to each other and they're weaponizing their fan bases against one another, it just gets really nasty. Because can Kim try to move on and date around? Sure, especially if you are. Yeah, I'm not knocking that. But you don't see pictures of those people unless they want you to see pictures of them. Like the same reason why we haven't seen Zion's fat ass, because nobody wants us to see Zion's fat ass. So you don't see it. So it's like, hey, stop playing these games. And then with the framing of they're trying to say I'm crazy. Well, you're doing some crazy stuff that would lead a lot of people to believe that you are crazy. But at the same time, the way you're framing it, that they're trying to make you seem crazy, and you're acting out the verse to all of the lights, you go, maybe you're onto something.
Yeah, he's not even doing the same PR spin that the Kardashians usually do, their marketing campaign. And all right, you're wearing the same ugly Balenciaga boots. Yes, said it to anybody that's bought those. I think the boots are hideous. I think that the fits look like he's working on a farm. And I don't really get it. Kanye's obviously, lost his way, found his way wherever he's at right now. And I do believe that they've tried to make him seem crazy, but he hasn't helped himself. He hasn't helped his case with spazzing out and all of that. And, just market yourself better. You make Yeezy, you made Adidas pop again. You can market yourself and play the game. And, I don't get it. So
I don't either, man. But man, let's talk about your Dolphins. Because we talk a lot of football on the side. And shit, man, you haven't been on the podcast since Black Men in Quarantine.
Yeah.
Like handsome Squidward when I was bald.
Yeah. What a time.
So your Dolphins, I mean, it's a lot going on down there. You fire your coach after back-to-back winning seasons, who is now suing the league. The same coach alleged that your owner tried to pay him $100,000 per loss to lose games in order to get Tua Tagovailoa. You end up with Tua at 5 anyways, although y'all definitely could have lost some other games. And not even just, for the pay, just season's over. You lose your last 2 games. I think one of those games was to Cincinnati. you pick first, and maybe you have where are my glasses at? I can't find my glasses, but you have Joe Cool.
Yeah.
And I think Brian Flores, for better or for worse, did the nice PR run. Hey, we wanted to trade all 3 of our first round picks to move up to get Burrow. Cincy said no. Smart move, Cincy. And he also said I wanted to take Justin Herbert. Hindsight is 2020. Just like Hugh said, Hugh co-signed that he was getting offered to lose, paid to lose games. And Hugh also came out and said he wanted Deshaun Watson, and he could not get them. I firmly believe that Brian Flores, after they did their evaluation, did not want Tua, but his owner was so smitten with Tua, and he was just stuck.
Yeah, I feel like the Dolphin situation is a cautionary tale across the league of owners overstepping or understepping in a way. I think that at some points Stephen Ross has been heavy-handed. At other points, he's kind of left the boys to be the boys. With Greer and with Chris Greer, the GM, and Brian Flores. And I think that relationship was symbiotic for a very long time, in spite of some of the habits. I think that the complaint is that Brian Flores was abrasive, and that's what wore out his welcome more so than anything. The narrative around it is that Chris Greer gave Brian Flores really everything that he wanted, aside from emptying out the cupboard the first year. Sure, I didn't give you much to play with. We really had an intention on this year that we want to rebuild, retool, do all of those different things. And sorry for that. Moving forward, I'll be completely transparent with you. And that's kind of what we saw. Brian Flores got to get any Patriot that cleared the waiver wire, anybody that had ever seen the Gillette Stadium, and I think that eventually he wore out his welcome just by all the turnover with staff, wanting more and more from Greer, maybe more autonomy. There was a report there. But I say all that to say that I think that Brian Flores exemplified really good leadership, throughout his whole time with the Dolphins. Minus one incident that I never really liked was the Kenny Stills situation. And for folks that aren't familiar, Kenny Stills' response to Jay-Z's "We're not kneeling anymore" Kaepernick comment. And then Brian Flores proceeds to play nothing but Jay-Z songs in the practice facility the following day. A gangster moment, but I could see how that would piss off players that don't like to be one-upped or shown up by their coach. Most of the coaches don't care about the music that's playing.
But, I think even though I didn't like it either, I think Flores had a great response to it. Was like, hey, yeah, I'm doing this because it's going to piss you off. And you still have to control yourself. And it's just a mind game, right? And I feel like something like that would happen in New England. It just wouldn't get out. And the problem is with these New England coaches, and this is not my own personal take. I got this from Michael Lombardi, who worked with Bill Belichick in Cleveland and New England. You got to bring in New England guys. I think McDaniels is going to work in Oakland because he's bringing his own GM. You can't try to convert people into the Belichick way of football, because it only happens that way in New England. It doesn't happen like that anywhere else. And trying to get people to do things your way when you're not Bill Belichick and they are used to doing it a certain way, which I feel like 90% of the league operates one way. And then you have your Belichick's, probably like your Andy Reids, who do things a specific way. And they're allowed to do that. And I think that's what hurt Flores. Also, hiring Chan Gailey as an offensive coordinator was just a bad hire.
So I'm going to disagree. Our yards per play were better than they've ever been, really, since the last time he was with the Dolphins. And that's the thing. I think that there was a misconception about what the offense could and couldn't do. And I think that it was as good as it had been at that point. Shout out to Omar Kelly, who gave me that information via Twitter, Miami beat writer. And so, I think that the offense, name the last time that the Dolphins had a running game outside of Jay Ajayi's few breakout games within him getting hurt. And it's really hard.
Cartersville's finest.
Exactly. You're talking Ronnie Brown.
Yeah.
I looked him up the other day, straight out of Auburn, and it's a wild time to think that Ricky Williams and Ronnie Brown, a number 2 overall pick, which people forget a lot of the time, that's the last time that we had a legitimate running game, and we were still bragging about 4 yards per carry when Brandon Jacobs was falling forward for 6 yards. And that was the time in the league, and I think that we just have never had a running game, and I think that contributes to where we're at. I'm frustrated with the team as a fan. I would have preferred to have Flores one more year at least. I don't think that he should have been to that point. I think that no disrespect to Chris Greer, maybe continuity is good there, and maybe Ross really trusts him. But the same guy that drafted Deion Jordan, number 3, and traded picks for him, doesn't get to continue making these mistakes with my folks. Like a winning coach, the first time we've had a winning season, back to back in a long time.
I remember maybe.
Yeah, and the thing is, Dave Wanstead was too good at going 8-8 and 9-7. He had like 110 and 6 a year at one point, and I think we made the playoffs, and that was the last time, or before Tannehill flukes out that year and gets hurt. Yeah, exactly. Just like it's all pain. It's all pain. And then the Ravens whooped their ass, and Ed Reed did his thing. But
Greer hire Adam Gase.
Yeah. Well, Ross did. Ross really liked him, but the problem was it was off of Peyton's word. Peyton came down to the facility and spoke good about him and did and was like, "You guys got to hire him." And I mean, we made the playoffs the first year, so it looked like it was legit, and then it just felt like somewhere out there it flamed out. And he was another dude that couldn't really build the right team, coaching staff to prop up the team. But we got to figure that out. But I'm intrigued by our new coach ultimately.
So yeah, you bring in Mike McDaniel, nice diversity hire by the Dolphins. People don't know Stephen Ross. He definitely put his money where his mouth was, behind the Black Lives Matter. He has a black GM. He had a black head coach in Brian Flores, and then, Mike McDaniel's one drop rule. So look, you can't call Stephen Ross a racist because he's putting his money where his mouth is, right?
Yeah. Until he throws his Trump parties. He had the thing in the Hamptons where it was like $1 million per plate or per seat at this fundraiser. And so it's like, there's obviously a divide. Like, he is more conflicted than a whore in church. And I think that I don't really get it, and like his allegiances just feel really divisive. Like, I really love my NFL team, but I won't take the coach that potentially wants to come to the NFL and pay him even when I need a coach and I fired him and it looks like I need a coach. There's so many of these situations where I just don't really understand it there. But with our new coach, I'm excited to see what McDaniel can bring. I really enjoyed watching there was an interview that Deebo Samuel does recently, right as he takes the job, and he just talks about how he turned him up. Deebo in 1 year does double what he had the production the prior 2 years, and so just seeing that and seeing his rushing, improvements, his rushing touchdowns, all of his yards per play, were just so impressive. And to hear someone be like, he's the guy that like really taught me and used me in the right ways, and we saw it on the field, and that's why they made made it to the conference championship ultimately, and almost made it to the Super Bowl. I love what he does by putting folks in motion, especially the linemen. You really, really see that. I think that he's going to turn us into a running team if we can get a running back, and he turned a rookie running back into arguably one of the best running backs in the league in 1 year's time. So big fan.
If we don't clog the conversation with the lack of true diversity hires in the NFL, I'm not mad at the hire. He's a guy coming from the Kyle Shanahan tree, and I prefer the Shanahan tree more than the McVay tree. Obviously, the McVay tree comes from the Shanahan tree, but I like the Shanahan tree a little bit more because it's they really care about running the ball. I think that McVay really wants to pass the ball, but he utilizes the run so that he can play action pass. But I think the Shanahan tree is committed to running the ball, period. You know what I mean? And some of the creative stuff that they did there, which is why I pushed back on the Shan Gailey. Shan Gailey, for one, he was a retread in Miami. He's going to be holding on to some of the Dave Wanstead stuff because that's who he was there with. But also that he just plays an older form of football, which obviously you gave me the numbers that said it was more productive. But I think your new coach is definitely going to innovate the offense, and more importantly than y'all getting a good running back, he's going to scheme your running back to get yards.
I hope so. I think that he can. The problem is the Dolphins have one of the worst O lines in the league. I think that we compete with Cincinnati, honestly, on just like having a really bad line. We've got some good converted left tackles that are now guards. Like Robert Hunt is one of those guys who's started to emerge. But I mean, we've spent probably 5 of our last, for the first 3 rounds for the last 4 or 5 seasons, it's been all offensive linemen essentially. And Austin Jackson hasn't been the guy that we needed him to be, and we drafted him in the first round. And we've had all of these picks, this war chest of picks, and the majority of them have gone to linemen, and we don't have much to show for it ultimately. I don't know.
Chris Greer, he's a guy making the picks. Real quick before we get out of here, Tua.
Tua's got to get stronger. Tua's got to get with like Russell Wilson's strength and conditioning coach or something like that. He definitely showed some more, physicality this year and showed he was able to take a hit. He was way less fragile. I wasn't as worried about him this year as I was previous season. The thing that I'm just not seeing is the throw power. I don't see a guy with a cannon. And I've gone back and watched footage at Bama, and they were perfectly precise passes. I think that we had an offense last year that tailored to his strengths, and it concerned me that it felt like there were some areas where he stepped back, and there was mostly things around confidence and pocket presence ultimately. And so I'm just worried that our offensive line woes are stunting his development. But this isn't a really strong class. I think that if Malik Wills, a guy like that falls to us in the draft, I think you bring in some competition. Because Tua, deserves to have to be pushed by someone maybe that's not perfect, but a project. And I think that makes me feel good. I'm glad to see our coach McDaniel get behind Tua and say that he's going to try to squeeze everything out of him. I think that he can. Tua is going to be a phenomenal play action quarterback. That was his strength. The first year under Chan Gailey, that I think that where he showed some strengths is rolling out in the pocket. And so bringing a running coach in who's focused on that, I think it's just going to open lanes for him to do what he wants. I think that my concern is that you need to be able to push the ball downfield at some point. That's Russell Wilson's best strength. And he has the accuracy, but none of the power. And so what are you going to do with our weapons? We dink and dunked all last year. I think that we gave him arguably the best weapon that you can give someone outside of Jamar Chase that's young. And, it's really on him. I do think that we need to rebuild our wide receiving core. I'd love to see my buddy come from Green Bay, come down to Miami and get paid too much. But
Vontae?
Yeah, why not?
Tua, why not? So with that, I think that if you can scheme a good play action game for Tua, with some shots down the field to Waddle, because Waddle does have that deep threat capability, I think you guys have a chance to really open up the offense. My biggest fear, though, is Tua's lack of confidence, Tua's lack of arm, and him having to be Drew Brees for y'all to compete at a high level, because that is such a high standard of what a quarterback needs to be. And I think that's what Tua's skill set is.
Tua reminds me a lot of now I'm forgetting his name. The quarterback that the Dolphins used to have that had
Jay Fiedler?
Who was it?
Chad Pennington or Jay Fiedler?
Chad Pennington. And he had no arm strength at all, nothing left in that shoulder, and found a way to just be really accurate. And I thought Tua's run that he had for that 4-game stretch where we were winning and he was playing well and was back healthy reminded me a lot of that. Where it's the ball only touches the ground 3 times when he's on the field. And he can be ridiculously accurate. He can beat people on slants. It's more about his precision and his decision-making more than anything else. And I think that's the problem is that the league has changed and we need more from him there. And I think that he can show with accuracy and maybe in the right scheme, guys are going to get open because of the play action ultimately. And so I think he can expose that. But I think that if Tua's going to have a longer career, he's just got to get stronger. And I think that he shows a desire and a willingness to get bigger. And he did that last offseason. And if he keeps bulking up, I think he can get there. That report about Flores trying to test him is wild. I don't think that that's true, but that's neither here nor there.
Fair enough, man. Hey, Josh, thanks so much for coming on, dog.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. Definitely a pleasure.
All right, dog. I'll holler at you.
All right, hold it down, bro.